Hello, Intro to Drawing class. This is Mr. Creighton, and today we're going to talk about drawing with perspective. So we are officially done drawing portraits, and we're going to move on to something new today. So what you need is you should have your sketchbook and a writing utensil. Again, I repeat, you should have your sketchbook and a writing utensil. If you don't have those, I'll give you 30 seconds to grab it, and then I'll begin teaching. So if you do have those things, if you could flip to the back of your sketchbook where we keep the notes, that would be great so we can get started. Again, if you do have a sketchbook and a writing utensil, please flip to the back where we keep the notes and date this, just so that you have all the notes together. So please write the date and we'll begin. So about 5 seconds, guys. All right, that's 30. So I'm going to begin teaching. All right, guys. So basically, we'll talk about drawing with perspective, and essentially, our goal for today is to make things look 3D, like these buildings here, when they're really not 3D. So that's the goal. So we're basically going to try to represent 3D shapes on a flat piece of paper. Some of you guys may have done this in middle school, so it's review for you, and some of you guys, this might be new to you. Either way, I'm going to ask that you're not talking and that I have your attention, just that way we can focus on being successful in class. So right away, the first term is going to be literally perspective. So what is it? Well, perspective is a drawing technique used to represent 3D shapes on a 2D picture plane. Again, perspective is a drawing technique used to represent 3D shapes on a 2D picture plane. What that means in summary, guys, is we're going to try to make shapes look 3D. We're going to try to give them height, how tall they are, width, how wide they are, going left to right, and depth, meaning how long they are. And your paper is flat. Your paper only has height and width, but we're going to try to make sure these shapes feel realistic and three-dimensional, even when they aren't. So we're going to basically create an optical illusion. So we're going to try to create space and make shapes feel, again, 3D, make shapes feel closer, make shapes feel further. And so this is a drawing method where you create an area and show how things appear to get smaller as they get further away. So traditionally, when I'm in class teaching you guys, I take you guys into the hallway and break it down so we can see how things get smaller as they get further. But in this case, if you look at the examples on your screen, so that photograph, bottom left, and that drawing, bottom right, you can see the top of the buildings. So it's as if we have an aerial view. So you're like birds in the sky and we're looking at the top. As we look down those buildings and look at the ground, all objects on the ground, of course, are smaller. And if you look really close, all of the sides of the buildings converge to one point in the distance. And as things get closer to that one point, they get smaller. And that's what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation and how we're going to represent it. So write down vanishing point, because that's important. So why is this perspective important to you? Well, perspective essentially is the ability to create space, which I just talked about a little bit, and form. Form is really making a shape look 3D. So instead of a square, we want to create a cube. We're talking about height, again, how tall a shape is, going top to bottom, width, how wide a shape is, so going left to right, and depth, meaning how long that shape is. So this will help your drawings appear more realistic and lifelike by creating the illusion of depth, which is the side of the shape. In order to help us do that, we're going to use a little thing called vanishing point. Literally, it's a little thing. It's a dot in the distance. So a vanishing point, if you did not write this down, because remember, you'll write down everything that's in bold, like every other presentation in this class. A vanishing point is the point that all of your lines converge to. So again, if you didn't write it down, a vanishing point is the point or points that all of your lines converge to. If you look on the bottom left, so that drawing, essentially that's what we're going to do in class today. And again, some of you guys may have done that in middle school, so you may be familiar with it. But for you, it's review. But for those of you who are new to this, we're going to try to make these shapes, again, look 3D when they really don't. So if you look really close, you can see that all of those shapes are actually converging, meaning going towards a point in the distance. And that's over that shape that's in the middle. So they're all going towards a vanishing point, and that creates this optical illusion that shapes are getting smaller as they get further away. So how do we start this thing? Please write down horizon line. But we do this in a couple of steps. So to start a drawing with perspective, you must do 3 things. First, establish a horizon line. Again, first, we establish a horizon line. The horizon line means your viewpoint. So that's the area where you're looking. So again, we establish a horizon line, which means your viewpoint. So once we have that horizon line established, we have an area to place our vanishing point on, and that is the second thing we do. So you place your vanishing point on that horizon line, and once that's established, we can start making our shapes. So third is we draw our shapes, and then we connect them to that vanishing point in order to make this look 3D. So if you look at every single image, they relate to those steps. So if you look at the image top left, that's our horizon line. And then we place that vanishing point on it. And then if you look at the box or that image top right, we're drawing that shape, and then we connect that shape to the point, and that gives it form. So now not only can we see the height and the width, which we've already drawn, we can see the depth. If you look at that third image at the bottom, we can see the depth, how wide those shapes are, or excuse me, how long those shapes are, and that's the key. So the horizon line. Moving on. So there are a couple types of perspective. We're really just going to focus on one, especially because I'm not there to teach you the second one, so which is a little bit more complicated. So please write down 1 point perspective, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So 1 point perspective is looking at the front, aka the face of the shape. 1 point perspective is looking at the front, aka the face of the shape. So the face meaning that's the side that you see. And then all lines recede to that single point, and that's why it's called 1 point perspective, because we're using 1 point. All lines recede or converge to a single point. So 1 point perspective is a type of perspective technique that shows how things appear to get smaller as they get further away. So we converge towards a single vanishing point on that horizon line, which we established in the last slide. And then 1 point perspective is only used when looking at the front of the object. Again, 1 point perspective is only used when looking at the front of the object. So if you look at the drawing, bottom left, of the city, you can see how we can see the front of the buildings, and then the sides of those buildings converge to that one little point in the far distance. Same thing with the geometric shapes bottom right. You can see how we see the front or the face of those shapes, and then the sides converge to that 1 point in the distance. This was a technique developed by Leo da Vinci, who we've already talked about, and you're familiar with him, so that genius from the Renaissance. So he created this technique in order to help you make shapes look 3D. So we're not just drawing them all over the place, and so this represents the idea of space. So the key, however, is when we draw these things, there's a couple of rules or steps that we'll follow, so that way you're not just drawing shapes all over the place, and so you're also connecting to the right sides. Skip. 1 point example. So perspective represents your viewpoint in real life. So unfortunately, again, I can't take you on the hall because I'm not there. But if you look at these two photographs, so clearly the photograph on the left represents this idea that all of the lines on the building, so the windows, the door, all of the lines on the street and the sidewalk all converge to a little baby dot in the distance called the vanishing point. And if you look at the image on the right, where I actually drew the line so that way you could see them. So I drew them digitally. You can see the horizon line. So that's our viewpoint. So the horizon line is essentially where the sky meets the ground. That's our viewpoint. And you can see how all the lines converge to a little dot in the distance that's on that horizon line. And that's what we're going to try to represent. So there's 3 rules we have to follow. And I'm going to have you write these rules down so that we don't get tripped up. It's going to make it a little bit easier for us so we don't have a bunch of mistakes, and so that way you also understand how to do this. So our 3 perspective drawing rules, and again, please write these things down. If you want to abbreviate them or summarize them, that's perfectly fine, but you still need to know what these things are. So the first one is you connect the closest parts of your shape to the vanishing point. Again, the first rule is connect the closest parts of your shape to the vanishing point. If you don't know what I mean by that, a great example of that is the image with the 4 geometric shapes, bottom left, has a orange triangle on it. And you can tell how there's 3 sides, of course, and we're connecting to the top side and also the bottom right because they're closest to our point. If you look at that pentagon, top right, so the pink shape, top right, we're connecting to the 3 closest edges, but not the ones that are further away. So we connect to whatever is closest to that point because that is the side that converges to our vanishing point. The second rule is that the back side of your shape follows the front. The second rule is that the back side of your shape follows the front. What that means is that essentially every time you draw a shape, so you draw the front side of the shape, aka the face of it, and then we connect the parts that are closest to the vanishing point. Well, when you're ready to cut off the back side of that shape, so that way it looks like a 3-dimensional form, the back side will look exactly like the front. So if you look at the triangle, again, that's an excellent example. The front side of that triangle is a diagonal. So the angle is a diagonal on the front side. Well, so is the back side. They are identical, and they represent each other. So the back side follows the front. And the third rule is objects are smaller when close to the vanishing point. And I talked about this a little bit earlier. Objects are smaller when close to the vanishing point, and that's how your perception works. So remember, vanishing point represents the distance. So obviously, when you see things in reality, when you're looking at 3-dimensional shapes, everything's life-size when it's right next to you. But of course, as things are further away, you perceive them as smaller. Of course, they're not smaller, but you perceive them as smaller in the distance. So objects are smaller when closer to the vanishing point, and that vanishing point represents the distance, aka shapes that are further away. So what we will do is we're going to practice this together. So we're going to practice some shapes together, and then you have a little guide sheet to work off of, and you're going to practice it individually. So just like every other practice session, we'll practice together, and then you'll practice on your own for the remainder of class. And that's how you'll get your practice points. I will check the practice tomorrow when I'm at school, just to make sure that you did accomplish what you were supposed to do. So in order to complete your practice session today, you will need obviously your sketchbook, because we'll draw on there, and then you'll also need a writing utensil and a ruler, so a 12-inch ruler from the counter. If you did not grab a ruler, please do so, and we'll begin. So again, you need your sketchbook, a writing utensil, and a 12-inch ruler. You need your sketchbook, a writing utensil, and a 12-inch ruler.